Our journey begins in Beijing, the capital of China, and a visit to the Forbidden City. Built some 600 years ago, it was the imperial palace of the Ming and Qing dynasties. Over the years, 24 emperors ruled the country from here, holding ceremonies and handling court affairs. It occupies an area of over 720,000 square meters, with 9,000 bays of halls and rooms. As you enter, you are confronted by numerous gates and halls, and it would be easy to get lost. So it was very important to keep one eye on the guide's flag. The Meridian Gate is the main entrance to the Forbidden City. Here, during the Ming and Qing dynasties, ceremonies would be held whenever generals were sent on an expedition, or when armies returned triumphant from battle. On passing through the Meridian Gate, we enter into the Tai He Gate and Square, and immediately we are aware that this is going to be a very long and exhausting day. Climbing the steps, guarded by bronze lions, we look out onto the magnificent splendour of the Tai He Hall. It has 55 rooms and is the largest palace of wooden structure in the whole of China. It is where the emperor held important ceremonies. The throne room, built during the Ming dynasty, is gold painted and is surrounded by a large gold plated screen. We are only just halfway as we leave the splendour of the Tai He Hall and look out over the Qian Gate. This is the inner court, where the emperor would live with his wife and concubines and handle his day-to-day work. That's if he could find time between handling the concubines. Jianjing Hall was the bedroom of the emperor in the Ming dynasty, and is where he would handle his affairs. At the end of the day, the imperial garden is where the emperor would come to relax. The two cypress trees grafted into one, they say, symbolises the unswerving love between husband and wife. The Yujing Pavilion was built on a pile of rocks. Every year on the 9th of the 9th, the emperor and his queen would climb to the top to enjoy the autumn scenery. Our hotel was situated in downtown Beijing, but was surprisingly modern. With very little free time and a heavy schedule ahead of us, this was a good opportunity to explore the neighbourhood. Beijing has a total population of 34 million, all of which seem to be out on the roads at the same time. It was difficult enough to get used to the cars driving on the right, but the cyclists seemed to please themselves, which was a nightmare if you wanted to cross the road. And if you thought you would be any safer on a pedestrian crossing, forget it. Tiananmen Square, flanked by government buildings, is the world's largest plaza and has seen many a conflict in the past. The biggest in the 80s, when tanks rolled into the square to quell riots, killing a number of demonstrators. Now tourists from all parts of the globe come to stroll in the early spring sunshine and to fly their kites, a popular Chinese pastime. Our guide then unexpectedly whipped us into a small building where we all sat at desks. A man in a white coat started to talk on acupuncture. Irene, in her best Chinese, was trying to tell him that all she wanted was larger breasts. But obviously this message wasn't getting across. As we noticed the others in the party getting the third degree, we made our excuses and dived out before he brought in the heavy mob. It had been an exhausting day, and now we were having to suffer 2 hours at the Peking Opera. Thankfully I slept through most of it, much to Irene's embarrassment. The next day saw us climbing up the wall, literally. The Great Wall in the north of China stretches 5,000 kilometers from east to west. Sadly, the day was gloomy, so I decided to walk only a couple of kilometers. The Chinese say you are not a hero until you have stepped on the wall. Believe me, you need to be a hero to step on the wall. It took more than 2 millennia for the Great Wall to be completed. In 221 BC, Emperor Qin unified China and had the wall built. It is reported that it is the longest cemetery in the world, with whole families being worked to death and buried within the walls. As if this hadn't sapped all our energy, we were now on a marathon walk along the sacred way guarded by sculpted stone animals to visit the Ming Tombs.
So after Qilin is a horse. Horse is just like the camel. It's another horse.
The last 2 days beats any physical training for the Olympics. Irene's knees had already given up and she opted to stay on the coach.
If women had difficulty in getting pregnant, they will go and pray to the Qilin because Qilin can bring child to the family.
Qilin.
So after Qilin is a horse. Horse is just like the camel. It's another.
After descending 12 flights of stairs, we found ourselves in the vaults. It seems these emperors didn't like dying alone and asked for volunteers, mainly their concubines, to join them in the afterlife. Our last day in Beijing was a little easier on the feet. This time we took a leisurely rickshaw to explore the quaint narrow alleyways of the Hutongs, who are fast disappearing.
$1, $2 for $1.
For the bag.
So this alley, this street is called Hutong. In this area, you can see extremely rich.
The wealthy and the poor live side by side, as seen by this rather splendid front door.
Poor people and rich people is getting bigger and bigger, especially toward the coming of Olympics. I guess there's a trend.
In contrast, we visited a Mr. Wu, who invited us into his humble home. It consisted of one bedroom, family room, a stove, and was very neat and tidy.
forever. Because the government used them.
带不到了。
You are always surrounded by street traders trying to sell you everything from fake designer watches to baseball caps.
Hello, Dems.
The guides try to put you off buying from these vendors, and you soon understand why. When travelling from place to place, the guide will tell you that they are stopping for a comfort break. These comfort breaks are conveniently situated in smart gift shops. It becomes fairly obvious they are on commission. Some of these shops are magnificent, like this jade factory. Or these beautiful enamels.
Could you see my
At others, young girls painstakingly paint Chinese scenes inside bottles, which is quite extraordinary. It was now time for a leisurely boat trip on the vast lake to admire the palaces and pagodas of the Emperor's Summer Palace. Kunming Lake was ordered to be built using the funds planned to build the Chinese Navy in the 1900s. An enjoyable lunch followed at a local restaurant. It is wise not to ask what you are eating. We couldn't leave Beijing before we visited the pandas. They seem to have a carefree life, eating bamboo shoots all day and sleeping. Sleeping was something we were badly in need of after an exhausting 4 days as we made our way to the airport. Our next destination, Xi'an, the ancient capital city for 11 imperial dynasties and the cradle of Chinese civilization.